This is part 4 of the mini-series, focusing on each type's least favourite things and the cognitive functions that are most likely to be responsible. The first dislike is being told what to do. This would be linked with their dominant TI because it is focused on accuracy and would therefore believe that it had the best information and would know the best course of action to take. This is probably more aimed at people that the ISTP views as incompetent or haven't got enough information to make a well-informed decision, rather than just anybody that tells them what to do. Also, the secondary SE will dislike this as well because it values freedom, and being told what to do will restrict this freedom. Secondly is stupidity. This is definitely an issue for TI, as TI will value intelligence and loves to learn as much as it can about a topic. So somebody who doesn't try to improve their knowledge base and remains closed-minded will cause an issue for an ISTP. Next is rigid structure. This will cause a problem for SE as it needs the freedom to be itself. With a very rigid structure, SE will need to keep a damper on its natural fun-loving side and will thus not be behaving as its true self. This can also be an issue for TI, as it is unlikely to be able to share its new ideas on how to improve things. And tertiary NI may get involved in this as well, because it likes to play around with new concepts that could potentially improve things, and it often does this in a non-conventional way because it's intuition, which a rigid structure would likely not allow. Last is people that won't get their hands dirty. I'd say this was an issue for TI, as it values honesty and integrity, and somebody who will boss people around, but refuses to muck in and do the task alongside everybody else, will not be respected by an ISTP. Also, NI will have a problem too, because it will see that the person does not have integrity, and that this is likely to cause a problem later down the line, as they are unlikely to be somebody you can rely on in case a difficult situation arises, or they may be the kind of person to go behind your back and destroy your trust. ESTPs dislike limits. I would say that this was an issue for the dominant SE, as it restricts SE's freedom, much like rigid structure is disliked by ISTPs. Also, secondary TI will have an issue, because its abilities may be limited, and any new idea that it comes up with may be restricted. Next up is stupid people. As with ISTPs, TI doesn't like this, because it works hard to know as much as it can about a topic, learning all the ins and outs of how something works, so it can become an expert on said topic. And the notion of stupidity is often synonymous with an inability to think for oneself, or a refusal to consider another point of view besides your own, which is exactly what TI aims to do. Next is authority. TI will have a problem with authority figures that don't seem capable of doing their job well. TI values respect, and any authority figure that is abusing their power or doing a very bad job of being in charge will not be respected and thus won't be liked by the ESTP. I don't think this applies to all authority figures, just the ones that the ESTP deems to be incompetent. Lastly is having to tone it down. I would say that SE would have the most problem with this, because it means that SE can't be in its true form of fun-loving, happy-go-lucky freedom. Also, telling an ESTP to tone it down will force them into their inferior NI, which is much calmer than their dominant SE, but is also in an inferior state, and thus is not somewhere that the ESTP feels comfortable being in for a long period of time, and this is likely to cause stress as well as annoyance. INTPs dislike a lack of intelligence. Dominant TI is the main reason for this, because, as stated previously, it desires to learn everything it can about a topic, remaining open-minded in case there is more information to be learned and obtained at a later date. A lack of intelligence is pretty much the same as stupidity, which is what the ISTPs and ESTPs dislike. And as before, this will probably be an issue when the perceived unintelligent person has decided that they know everything and refuses to accept that they may actually have the wrong end of the stick. TI likes debating as well, so this can cause an issue if the other person is not willing to have their ideas questioned. Emotional perspectives will be an issue for inferior FE, which is not as strong as dominant TI for INTPs. They will prefer to remain logical about issues, so intense emotions can overwhelm them by throwing them into their inferior FE, which is not somewhere they feel comfortable. Also, their TI cannot grasp onto the argument being put forwards if only emotions are used to explain it, and thus the INTP won't understand, which is another uncomfortable feeling for them. Scientific stagnation will be an issue for TI, as it knows there is always more to learn about a topic, just like the phrase, the more you know you don't know. So TI will always be open to the potential of new information. Also, secondary NE won't like this either, because it loves to come up with new ideas and concepts, so a stagnation in any area, but especially science, where we all know that there is so much more that we have yet to discover, will cause an issue, especially if the reason for said stagnation is due to a refusal to try a new approach, or close-mindedness towards the concept that the current knowledge may in fact be wrong. TI will also dislike invalidating ideas, because it will most likely be taken as someone calling the INTP stupid, which will not go down very well. A healthy debate is always encouraged, but just shutting down someone's idea without a discussion is not good for TI or NE, which likes to play devil's advocate and play around with all sides of the coin before coming to its own conclusion. ENTPs dislike rules. As with authority for ESTPs, I would say that this was not a dislike for all rules in general, just the ones that the ENTP doesn't think make sense. Secondary TI would dislike these rules because there is no logical ground for them, and there is often no room for debate. Most rules are just set in stone, and that's the end of it. There's no room to question, or to see if another approach would be better instead. Also, dominant NE will dislike this as it's restricting NE's freedom, especially if the rules are aimed at expression or thought. As said before, NE likes to play around with different views and opinions before it settles on the one it thinks is best. So if it is not allowed to do this, then it would force the ENTP into their inferior function of SI, which will cause them stress. I'm not quite sure what is meant by hiding their power level. Sounds more like playing a video game than real life, but for the sake of this video I will make the assumption that it means hiding their intelligence, or how good they are at something. In which case, TI will dislike this, because it will feel that it knows best, but for whatever reason it can't showcase its talents, and must let someone else who is probably less capable do it instead. Also, NE will dislike this, because it will restrict NE's natural talent at coming up with new ideas and playing devil's advocate. Again, this will probably push the ENTP to their inferior function of SI, and ENTPs know that this is not where they are at their strongest, and will put them at a disadvantage. Objective morality can be a big issue for NE, because it is the idea that everybody has the same moral values and holds to them, and that leaves no room for interpretation or freedom to think for oneself. Also, TI won't like this because the facts don't actually line up. Some people think it's okay to do really bad things, and that's why they end up in prison. The concept of objective morality removes free will and free thought, and both NE and TI will have a massive problem with this. Being written off for being unorthodox will annoy NE, because being traditional is what NE's counterpart, SI, loves to do. So if somebody basically tells the ENTP that they want them to be more traditional and to stop having such strange ideas and playing around with the status quo, then they are, in effect, telling the ENTP to not be themselves. NE loves to play around with new ideas and concepts, and having it as a dominant function means that this is an integral part of both the ENTP and the ENFP's personalities. Therefore, it is not something they can simply stop doing. All personalities need to be appreciated for both their strengths and their weaknesses. No type is better than any other. Together, we can learn to balance out each other's weaknesses by using our own strengths, and that is what makes it so exciting. I hope you found this series interesting, and maybe even learned something along the way. As always, thank you for your time.